I'd like to welcome all of you to the final competition on the final day of my final interregnum, which is final debate. First, though, before we get debating, I have a few things I need to say. First of all, notice that we are not on campus. This is not our space. I think that's one of our key accomplishments, is that we're back at this church and we are not in the city room for this. That being said, that means we need to be respectful of this place so we can come back. So don't leave any trash, don't break anything, be courteous, be professional, thank you. And then one other thing is I would like to introduce a man that we have worked very closely with. He is the Interregnum faculty advisor, Dr. David Tubbs.
Thank you, Sean. So it's wonderful to be back in a church for the final interregnum debate, and I welcome you all here. And as Sean mentioned, and as some of you have known for a while, I am the faculty advisor to the Interregnum Committee. It's been a great joy for me to work with the students on the committee this year. It's a singular pleasure, and I think they really all deserve a round of applause at the outset. In my capacity as faculty advisor to the Interregnum Committee, a few administrators asked whether I would be willing to say a few words before we commence this evening's event, particularly with respect to this year's Interregnum lecture. And I am willing to do this because I believe, along with several faculty colleagues, that this might be a teachable moment for the King's College. So I just wanted to make a few comments. I believe that there is a notion that has been circulating that is inaccurate, and so I'd first like to respond to that particular notion that Mr. Kimball was in some ways, in giving the lecture on Wednesday evening, doing so as a representative of the college. This is not true. Mr. Kimball was invited to give the lecture every year, as long as I've been at King's since 2005. There has been an invitation to either a distinguished academic or a person in public life of some distinction to give the lecture. That person is a guest of the college, and the crucial point here is that the principles of academic freedom that we have adopted at King's also pertain to every person who comes to the college and gives a lecture or a talk or is even just a discussant, okay? So I understand that a significant part of the community found Mr. Kimball's ideas to be controversial, objectionable, some said offensive. And let me say the following. Having attended many interregnum lectures over the years, this is not entirely new. We have had other controversial lectures in the past. The point is that we as a college several years ago adopted principles of academic freedom, robust principles of academic freedom, and it's my impression that perhaps you, the students, are not fully aware of the principles that we adopted, okay? And we are doing this in a way that I think is very Kingsian, and it distinguishes us from a lot of other colleges and universities in the United States. The principles that we have adopted were formulated, first version, by the University of Chicago, which some of you know is a great liberal arts institution, and they're commonly referred to as Chicago principles. We, as a Christian college, were allowed to modify the principles ever so slightly in view of our Christian profile as an institution, but the principles are nonetheless very robust. And I just wanted, again, in the hope of educating the whole community, just read ever so briefly a few of the principles, okay? So the opening statement is the following. Because the King's College is committed to free and open inquiry, it guarantees all members of the King's College community the broadest possible latitude to speak, write, listen, challenge, and learn. That's the opening statement. And then towards the end of the statement of academic freedom, we find the following. This is a summary view. In a word, the King's College fundamental commitment is to the principle that debate or deliberation may not be suppressed simply because the ideas put forth are thought by some or even most of the members of the King's College community to be offensive, unwise, immoral, or wrong-headed, okay? Now, you may think on the basis of hearing these principles that, well, this is almost like courting anarchy. But let me remind you of the following. Third principle I want to read. The King's College greatly values civility, and all members of the King's College community share in the responsibility for maintaining a climate of mutual respect, okay? So this is what I want to say, and I think many of you are aware of this perspective. We as a nation are highly polarized. Some historians say that the United States has never been as polarized as we are now, except perhaps for the decades leading up to the Civil War. Okay, the prospect of civil war is something that academics and political commentators talk about. But one way that you, as future college graduates, can serve the country is just by modeling respectful and civil exchange of ideas. This, I don't know if it's ever been more crucial in my life than it has been in recent years. The last 5 years, just striking in how much incivility there is and how much rancor there is when people discuss public affairs, okay? All of you are entitled to your own views on Mr. Kimball's lecture, all of you, okay? But the hope would be that we would aim high in discussing that lecture, that we would try very hard to understand the perspective of other people, beginning with Mr. Kimball himself, try to understand the perspective of other people, because the first rule of criticism really is this. If you're asked to evaluate something, whether it be a film or a book or a speech, a lecture, the first rule of criticism is you should try as far as possible to take it on its own terms. And you may say, I did my best to take it on its own terms, but I still found it wrong-headed, offensive, egregiously wrong. So be it. You are allowed to have that perspective, but we ask that you do your best to express your ideas temperately, in a spirit of mutual respect and civility, with the goal of providing greater understanding. Remember, the academic mission of the King's College presupposes a lot of disagreement because we are all in search of the truth, okay? So I want to conclude on that note. We expect that there will be different perspectives, there will be different points of views. There are students at the college who are liberal, there are students at the college who are centrist, there are students at the college who are conservative. We all still are part of one community, and we can be a community characterized by mutual respect, goodwill, and civility whenever we exchange ideas. So thanks very much, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sean.
All right, so let's the debate begin. First, let's introduce the judges. So I would like to introduce Dr. David Tubbs, Miss Letitia Mosqueda, Dr. Jennifer Thorpe, Dean Leedy, Miss Andrea Lopez, and thank you, judges, for taking your time to be here this evening and judging this debate. And then let us introduce the competitors. So the government team will be represented by the House of Thatcher with Isabella Rush and Esther Wickham. And then the opposition team will be represented by the House of Churchill with Sam Parks and Colton Gottwalls. So the final debate motion is, this House believes that the strengthening of the individual will, not the community's will, is the best path to readiness. I now welcome the Prime Minister to begin their constructive.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. I will begin my time in 3, 2, 1. So, as government, we do believe that the strengthening of the individual will, not the community's will, is the best path to readiness. First, we want to define a few terms. We define strengthening as the healthy selfishness and sense of identity, which I'll talk about further. Individual will as what one is able to do to fulfill purpose. And readiness as the ability of a person to handle/prepare for difficult situations. First thing we want to talk about is a weighing mechanism, something we believe the entire round should be judged by. This is, what is the best path to readiness? We do concede that the community's will can help an individual grow. However, we don't believe it is the best way to prepare for readiness. On to our first point. We believe that the individual should come first and the community second. This is because we believe that helping individuals allows for them to feel safe and secure. Money that is likely to then go to neighbors or other people, hence the community. This also strengthens the community as a whole because individuals themselves are what make up communities. We believe that if the community is helped first, it ultimately hurts the individual more. Money put in the community to help the population does not mean the money is directly going to families in need. This also does not mean other resources are going to families in need. Next, we believe in strengthening of their will. And we believe this can be done through 2 ways: healthy selfishness and a sense of identity. Any POIs from OP about the modeling? Okay. Thank you. All right, so healthy selfishness. It may sound a little bad, but we believe healthy selfishness is a person who allows themselves to be helped first before extending effort towards other people. We believe that the person who helps everyone but themselves is left with nothing. And the person with nothing cannot possibly be ready for anything that comes in the future. Healthy selfishness is the act of putting yourself first. Like on an airplane, when they tell you to put the gas mask over yourself first and then help other people, this is because if you are not in a fit state to help others, you will not be able to do so effectively. Next, we want to talk about a sense of identity. We believe a sense of identity is someone who knows what they want and what they can handle. They have a secure sense of self that cannot be sabotaged by other people. We believe this helps someone prepare for future situations because in situations such as marriage, they are joining with another person for life, sharing all of their resources together. And we believe that if a person knows themselves and knows what they want out of life and how much they can handle out of life, this is a basis for a healthy relationship. They are ready to go into this next big step. Next, we believe that having a sense of identity also helps when you have children. When you have a child, this is a newborn baby who you are able to create as a new person into the world. It is your job to teach them important skills, such as self-identity, such as confidence, such as readiness, and anything like that. Parents who are mentally healthier create better childhoods for children because they know themselves. They are not afraid to teach their children what they know in a manner that keeps them safe and knowledgeable. We believe this leads to less generational trauma in families, thereby creating healthier communities, thereby helping society as a whole. Any POIs? Okay. Next, we want to talk about the best path to readiness, which is what we have defined as the weighing mechanism for this debate. We believe that communities put an individual in charge because if a community is in trouble, the first thing they do is go to someone and place them in charge and have them help solve their problem. If an individual's will is weak, the community will therefore be weak as well. We also believe that strengthening an individual's will helps them because it allows them to feel a need to save themselves. If someone receives help, yet they don't want to help it, they don't want that help, they don't pursue it properly, they don't use it properly, then they're not going to be able to actually further themselves in life. They are not ready for what comes next. We believe that if you give somebody who does not want help anything external, this will only be temporary, and you have only done the bare minimum. Somebody needs to want to help themselves in order to properly be in a fit state for future situations, hence being ready. Again, if a person is able to better themselves, they have strengthened their will, and they are ready for the future, then they are comfortable and secure in life. This allows for them to handle strenuous situations, such as you have something happen to your family and now you need to pay medical bills. Well, someone who has been very ready for life is going to have savings to help with that. Or if a situation happens in your friend group and there's a sudden fight that breaks out, being ready, knowing yourself and knowing other people will allow you to help mitigate these situations in a way that is safe for everybody. And a sense of identity helps everybody when in relationships in life, going on into their careers, going on into everything else they would like to do. A sense of identity is what enables people to have respect for themselves, respect for other people, and ultimately respect for their community. The individual will should be strengthened first because they are the backbone of every community. Okay, I was going to ask for another POI. So we believe that because of all the reasons that we have given the judges, this is why the strengthening of the individual will, not the community, is the best path to readiness, which is why we hope you vote opposite government. Thank you.
First of all, the members and leader of the opposition would like to thank everyone for coming out today. We feel emboldened that we get to meet together as a community again. The COVID-19 pandemic at the onset left a lot of us feeling alone and unready to tackle the world, and being able to look out and see all of your faces tonight helps us feel ready and helps us feel strengthened in having this discussion tonight. Thank you. In the first few chapters of Genesis, we see that God himself does not think we are meant to be alone. He created Eve because he knew that we needed community. When we try and set out and do things on our own, we often fail. Our willpower is a fickle thing. It's based off of what we ate that day, how we feel that morning. But it's when you have the support system and the will of a community around you is what enables you to accomplish great things. Being alone is not the condition we were created for. From the very beginning, as we've already said, God created other people because he knew that we just would not function alone. In addition to this, we're not just supposed to have community with other people, but we're supposed to have community through God. The Bible teaches us that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. We are weak, we are fallen, and we need community with God to be ready to go down that path and be more like Christ and serve other people. The government wants us to believe that we should look to the individual, and that the individual should be the one to go out on their own and be able to accomplish great things. They said, and I quote, "The individual is the backbone of the community, and the community gets its strength through the individual." The opposition would like to argue that Christ is the backbone of the community, and that we get our strength through Christ and not through the individual. In one of the readings for Interregnum, we read the book To Build a Fire, the short story, I should say. And the central message of that story is that we are unequipped and unprepared to do things on our own. The man goes out on the Klondike after heeding the warnings of the old man and just ignoring them completely, where he said, when it is this cold out, you cannot go alone. You might have the supplies, you might have the experience, but you are going to need other people to help you. And at first, as this man is surviving and succeeding, he stands with the government's point and he says, no, it's through the individual will that I'm ready to go out and survive and make it to my destination. But by the end of the story, right before he passes, he realizes, I was wrong. It's not the individual will that gives me strength. It was the strength of the community and the people I could have had with me and the people I could have had around me if I would have just waited that would have made me ready to accomplish what I set out to do. We fear as the opposition that if we go with the motion the government has put forward, which again is this House believes that the strength of the individual will and not the community's will is the best path to readiness, that we will be faced with a culture of rampant individualism like we have today, not at this time. We have seen the damage that happens when people focus on themselves and not the community. When they say, no, I'm ready to do it. We saw how it can affect them, and we also have seen how it can affect the community. If we ignore the importance of the strength of the community, we will not be serving those around us and doing what Christ has called us to do. And the reason we are called to do that and to serve the community is because the community's will is more important. Now that we got those initial things out of the way, I did want to hit on some of their definitions. We believe that their definition of strength being healthy selfishness and a sense of identity is not what strength means. I think me and my member of the opposition would put strength more in terms of the ability to endure hardship and to keep going when things are difficult. We would define the individual as an individual and the individual will as the strength that we have on our own without any support systems and the ability of what we're able to do completely and totally on our own. We would define the community's will as the camaraderie that we feel and that we were created to feel that strengthens us and enables us to serve Christ. And we would define readiness as the ability to set out to accomplish the ultimate goal, which is to become more like Christ and serve the people of this world and to glorify God. So, in light of that, we believe that the strength of the individual will is an idol or distraction from trying to do that. And focusing on that and saying that that is what makes us ready is not a biblical message, but is more of a modern, secular message. As we said already, man was not meant to be alone, and man was meant to be in communion with God. Christ came to earth with the message of, you are fallen. The law has shown, the Old Testament law has shown that you are unable to accomplish things on your own. You cannot meet the standards that God has. We need Christ to be able to become better and to be pure in God's eyes. And since community was not defined earlier, we would say that community does not have to be more than two people. Your community with God is what enables you to be ready to go out and set out to do the great things that He has for you in your life. I'll take your POI now.
So individuals pray to God. Individuals create community. If every single person rely on another, then nobody can stand alone with God.
Yeah, when they're praying to God, they're in communion with God. So the point here is, if you guys, I said that when you pray to God, you're in communion with God.
Okay.
So I don't know if you all could hear, but she asked, well, individuals pray to God and individuals have a relationship with God. But as we've outlined, we have not defined, or the government has not defined, what the threshold is to be community. Community can be two people. It can be you and your relationship with God when you have a community with Him and you have a community with the Holy Spirit to enable you to be ready to do. If you will take their side of the motion, you have to believe that completely and independently of any outside help, any outside resources that comes from either God or other people, you are able to accomplish what you have set out to do. I think as modern people, we realize that we don't know how to make the food that we eat. We don't know how to make the clothes on our back. We don't know how to pave the roads that we use to drive the cars that we don't know how to drive. Every single thing we do is enabled by the will of the community that came together and said, you know what, we are stronger together. We are stronger when we have a strong will as a community and not I as an individual, just through my own willpower and my own strength can set out to do the things that I want to do. And even when individual will comes in, as they outlined multiple times, the individual will pours into the community. Just because individual will is a source of community will does not mean that the community's will is not the best path to readiness. We are not saying that the individual will has no value and that they don't pour together, but as they've already outlined, the individual will on its own is kind of worthless. It's when the individual wills come together to create a strong community will, that is when you see the strength and you see the readiness to be able to accomplish the things that you set out to do and to accomplish the things that God has called us to do. And that is why we as the opposition feel that through everything we have outlined, especially the message of the gospel, that community will is the best path to readiness and not the individual will. Thank you.
is fun. Okay. This is so wobbly. Oh my gosh. Okay. It's okay. It's fine. We're good. I'm ready. Okay, sorry, that was a bad joke. Okay, so if everyone is ready, and the opposition team. Okay, great. In this first member of government speech, I'm basically just going to be talking about the resolution and what we're actually debating in today's debate round. This is the resolution. This House believes that the strengthening of the individual, not the community's will, is the best path to readiness. This is a Christian institution. Of course, we are talking, and we all believe in God, and we believe in God's will and God's community, and that when we're in prayer, when we go to church, we're in God's community. We are not saying that by valuing the individual's will, we are isolating ourselves from God. That's just completely impractical and an unfair burden that the opposition team has placed on the government side. Talking about the definition of individual will, he said, on our own, completely by ourselves, isolated. My first response is we're not talking about isolation. We're not talking about isolation. In reality, we can't debate that. That's just like unfair, and I think logically, like without even thinking about it a lot, that's just an unfair burden. The impact of this is we have to understand what is the first step towards readiness. What is the first step towards readiness? Should we focus on the community's will, the purpose, or the individual's will? Again, the second impact is, again, purpose. When looking at not just the individual, but the will of the individual, the way that the government team has defined individual will is the purpose. It can be the purpose of the individual to support, praise or honor God. It could be to go get food. It could be to go get coffee. It could be whatever it is for the individual and their purpose in their life. We're not talking about like their own isolation and their own cutting off from community. We're just saying that in order for us to be ready, the best path to readiness, we must first strengthen the individual will. We're not talking about absolutes, and it's an unfair burden for the opposition to place on the government side if they're saying that if you side with government, you're excluding God. That's just completely wrong. Going down to the idea of Genesis and how God said we need community, my first response is, what did Adam do? He basically was like, hey, like, there's this tree, and then Eve was like, oh, there's this tree, like, just take it. And what happened? Community corrupted society. So the impact of this is sin corrupts, community corrupts. And obviously we're not going to say that, oh my gosh, if you're in community, it's really bad and everyone's going to be sinful. But what we have to understand is, yes, community is important, but what is the first step? The individual will. If we want to be ready, and if we want to be ultimately prepared for something, we have to look at the individual, because when faced with difficult situations, even in a community, with Interregnum committee, if something happens, who do we look for? We look at Emma Powell. We're like, oh my gosh, you're the chair. What do we do? And her as the individual has to decide. And she takes the community and she makes her decisions and says, this is the next step. And if they don't know what to do, they go to Tubbs. And they're saying, Dr. Tubbs, what do we do? Because we do not know. The first step for readiness is the individual will, and that's just a fact. Going down to the idea of Christian community, and we have to have a strong Christian community in order to be ready. My first response is, again, I'll say your first few lines.
Isn't Tubbs and Emma Powell part of your community?
Yes, but I'm saying the first step for them to be ready is they're an individual. So ultimately, their individual will is going to impact the community. So under this idea of corrupt community, but here's the thing. There's corrupt community, but there's also corrupt individuals. So we're going to make the playing field fair and balanced. But we have to understand that we're not debating absolutes. We can't debate in this really amazing world where community is great, and if we isolate ourselves and we're just individuals, like, I guess that makes sense, but it's just not what we're debating today. We're debating the real world and practical steps in the real world. Going down to an extra point, with everything that Bella said, just cross that and like continue that with the flow of everything. I'd like to add another point to that. You can tag this as individuals, again, make up community. Individuals make up community. What we really want to impact here is that the community's will starts with the individual. The purpose of the community and the progression of the community starts with the individual. Yes, individuals support and add ideas to community, but again, we're looking at this idea of what is the best path to readiness. What is the first step in the right direction that we make when we're faced with difficult situations, when we're saying, oh, we have to be ready for this, what should we do? We look to the individual first. This is something that has been uncontested by the opposition side. An example of this is the military. Now, there's boot camps, there's a lot of structure and order that comes to that, and we have to prepare each individual first before they go out in combat, before they go out and fight as a community. Another example like another example like this is what we're doing right now, Interregnum. Yes, we all came as a community to get together to have a specific purpose, to have a specific will, and we all had to get ready together. But what did it start with? It started with me having to wake up this morning and get ready. It started with Bella having to wake up and get ready this morning. It started with the individual first in order to support and progress society. So with this idea of the community ultimately leads to the best path of readiness, we have to understand that there needs to be an aspect of healthy selfishness, like my partner talked about when it comes to airplanes. You put your mask on first before you give it to the other person. This is a balanced and healthy view of being selfish, because ultimately the best path towards readiness is through the individual's will. Going down to this idea of, like my partner talked about, when it comes to like marriage and relationships. The institution of marriage and relationships are super important, and that's really important for two people to work together, quote unquote, as a community. But how do we keep that afloat? How do we progress that, and how do we sustain that? And how do we allow them to be ready in strenuous or difficult situations? They each have to have their alone time, whether that be with God or with other girls or what have you. They have to have their own will and their own purpose first before they can come to the community with something to offer, in order for them to be ready for whatever they face. So when looking basically at everything we've been debating right now, there hasn't been a lot from the opposition side that has shown to you that if you side with the government team, we're not going to be ready. Again, we're not debating absolutes. I do believe that the community's will can be ready and can support that in a good way. But I think ultimately we have to strengthen first the individual. That is the first step towards readiness before we get to the community. So when looking at this debate round, we have to come down with this idea of, without strengthening the individual first, the community will fail. Let me say that again. Without strengthening the individual first, the community will fail. Just like Bella said, when we're faced with difficult situations and there's a huge community, who's the first person we look at? We look at the leader. We look at whoever is leading. And if they're not ready as an individual, if they didn't wake up and have their morning coffee, if they didn't wake up and get dressed and brush their teeth and do whatever they have to do, if they did not have their own individual readiness, how are they able to contribute and to progress their own community? This hasn't been contested by the opposition, and that's why you should be voting for government today. Thanks.
Thank you. First, I want to start off by pushing back on a little bit. The government has stated that the first step is promoting individualism within the person. We would argue that the first step is finding community with Christ. The Bible says that we are not enough in ourselves, and whatever we set out to do, we will fail without Christ. So therefore, the first step should be finding community with Christ. Oh, and also, the government said that, provided the example of the army as teaching the individual to be prepared. Well, recently I've been involved in a book club at the King's College, and it's called On Killing. And the number one thing in that book club I have learned is that, it was shocking to me, so I can understand how they could be wrong in this, was that the reason why the Army is successful the reason why the Army is successful is that the guys are afraid of letting the guy next to them down. They're afraid that they're gonna mess up and the guy next to them is gonna die. And that community, that trust, that bond of brotherhood, that's what allows them to be successful. And that's what keeps them going. When you're getting shot, you're not standing there because you're good at shooting. You're gonna run away. But when you have a community around you that is looking up to you and that's counting on you and you're counting on them, there's accountability. And that accountability is found in the community. So once again, let me restate the prompt. This house believes that the strengthening of the individual will is the best path to readiness. Let me say this. The house of Sir Winston Churchill is a band of brothers striving to be virtuous statesmen, dedicated to serving God and others. Let me rephrase. The house of Sir Winston Churchill is a group of guys readying each other to be virtuous statesmen, dedicated to serving God and others. The King's College itself has recognized this need of community. When the college was founded, they said, how do we want to create our college? They looked at public schools, they looked at private schools, they looked at fraternities, and they looked at no fraternity schools. And they settled with the house system. The house system promotes this accountability that I talked about earlier. It allows for room to mess up, to grow, to build your individual will through the community. Just a second. Okay. So without the community, what are we building our individual will to, right? So if we take out the community part, and we take out community with God, what's the individual for? The house system, the part of the genius of the house system and why I love it so much, I would not be at the King's College without the house system. I would not be here without the brothers around me to support me and to I realized that the reason why I wanted to stay at this college was that I had brothers around me that would help grow me, that would help me be a better person, that would help me strengthen my will and be able, once I got into the world, to stand firm in what I believe. Now I'll answer your question.
So it's a popular military saying, no man left behind. Also, the individual people create every single community you've spoken of. You haven't given a single example of how the community itself is more important than every individual within it.
Well, first of all, I'd say every individual is important. But the community, as you said, is the individual. So, in the Army, the individual is not the overarching theme. It's the Army. The Army is a group of guys. When you see one guy, you're not intimidated, you're not impressed, you're not awed. When you see a group of 1,000 guys, you are all those things, and that's why the Army is so effective. So, once again, this house believes that the strengthening of the individual will is the best path to readiness. How do we know that? Well, let's go back to the Bible. Jesus himself says, seek solitude in your brother, in your church. And I think that's important. The government also mentioned that once Eve was introduced, the community was corrupted. Well, God introduced Eve, so there's a reason for that, right? One of our interregnum meetings is the Screwtape Letters. The Screwtape Letters is a discussion between a senior demon and his nephew. And his nephew is luring and trying to get his patient, a human, to the devil's side. One of the things Screwtape tells his nephew is the importance of the individualization of his patient. He says, take him away from the church. Get him involved in something else. Take him away because the church is a pillar of light. It is like a flame, a wall of flame that is searing the devils as they get closer to it. So, bottom line, take him away from the church. If the devil does not like the church and the community, wouldn't it make sense that the community is in fact important? And for these reasons, we'd like to remind you guys that the community shapes the individual. The community has a lot. It forms the individual will. And that is not a bad thing. That is a good thing. They talk about marriage. How do we know what a good marriage is? We look at our community. We look at our parents. We look at our grandparents. And we look at God. And God is the perfect marriage, as in with us and with him. He says that the church is his woman, like he's married to the church. All right, guys. Thank you. That's it.
All right, remember, guys, the church is women. To begin my closing speech, I want to read the position of the government one more time. This House believes that the strengthening of the individual will, not the community's will, is best in the path to readiness. They state that the beginning of the community will begins with the individual will. Although we already push back against that by saying that the first step of any kind of strength is community with God, and that is a sense of a type of community will. But if we were to take their side and say that the individual will is the first step of the community will, that still does not negate the fact that it's when those individual wills come together as a community will that there's a multiplying effect, creating us and making us more ready to accomplish what we set out to do. So to say that the individual will is a factor, I guess is okay, although we have argued that you cannot do anything as an individual and that you do not have a strong will on your own. If we take their point, the community will strengthens the individual will as they all come together and form one will, and that has a stronger effect, although they both have could have a positive effect, that has a stronger overall effect than the individual wills on their own. And we do believe that they have to argue for the strength of the individual will on its own, given that the motion says best in the path to readiness. If it is the best in the path to readiness, it has to be able to suffice on its own. They also talked about how Adam and the introduction of Eve and that community somehow was the origin of sin in the world. And I think that ignores the fact of the temptation of the devil. And yes, you guys could say that through that conversation and through that experience that they had some community with the devil. And it goes to show that there is a such thing as bad community. And so we don't feel that an example of a bad community goes against what we're trying to argue here for today. They advocated for a healthy selfishness. We would argue that it was a healthy selfishness to become more like God and to have gained knowledge of good and evil that led to the fall, not community. They also say that you have to help yourself first. Sometimes and oftentimes you are unable to help yourself first. When you fall down and fail to meet the standards that you have set for yourself or that God has set for you, the people that come around you, that community, that will is what comes together and gives you strength to accomplish and do what you were meant and created to do. In our closing time, I want to go back over the points we outlined earlier. Firstly, God acknowledges that we need a community of people. The creation of Eve and the statement that man is not meant to be alone shows that God believes that the best thing in the path to readiness and the best thing is a community will and not an individual will. In addition to this, we would want to stress that community with God allows us to strengthen and embolden our will and allows us to be ready to accomplish the things that we set out to do. To say, go ahead.
What about non-religious people?
Well, are you arguing that non-religious people are more ready than religious people?
You just talked about community with God, so what community do they have if they don't have a community?
They don't have community with God and are weaker for that.
Okay.
It is this community with God that we feel strengthens people. And so to say that, okay, well, there's irreligious people, well, there's also people who have just weak will overall or have no ability to do things. If somebody's living a poor life, that's not a counterexample to what we're trying to say here, which is that the community will is best in the path to readiness. And the Bible outlines two important types of community: community with others and community with God, and community with others within the greater sphere of God. As my partner pointed out, God, in the Screw Tape Letters, they talk about separating the individual from the church. And that is how you tempt him, because the devils in the book realize that the individual will makes you unready. It is when you have the strength of the community will, the confluence of all those individual wills together, creating the community will, that is when you have strength, and that is when you can stand up to temptation and be ready to fight for what is right. The reason that you need the community will is because the individual will is faulty. And yes, as we've acknowledged, the community will is in some part made up by individual wills. But the reason that the community will is stronger and better on the path of readiness is because as each individual will may strengthen or wane throughout the day or throughout the year, as different people face different struggles, the community will can remain steady as a balancing act between all of these fluctuating wills of individuals. As I said in my opening argument, the gospel story revolves around the fact that we are unready for life as individuals. The church, Christ, and the community that we find with the merging of those two things is much stronger will and much more enabling us to be ready than the individual will would ever be. To say that the individual will is stronger and to say that that's the most important thing is not a feasible thing to say. And they'll argue, well, it's the individual will is the more important thing because it leads into the community will. But what we're saying is, even if it does lead into the community will, which one has the stronger effect? The more people you have in a community and the more individual wills you find in it, strengthens the people more and more as they all come together. And so to say that, yes, it's a factor of it, it's like saying that, flour is more important and more nutritious than bread because it's one of the first ingredients that you put into making it. Sorry, that's my case.
Can everyone hear me? All right, I will begin my time in 3, 2, 1. Before I go into my positive constructions of this round and summarize exactly why government has won, I want to do some preliminary rebuttal for what we heard from the opposition. First, we want to bring back in the way mechanism that we set, the best path to readiness for all. And again, going back to the motion, this House believes the strengthening of the individual will, not the community's will, is the best path to readiness. We believe that the opposition shirks their burden by focusing only on religious communities. If we look at the arguments that we have given for these church communities, we have provided plenty of saying that even within these communities, they do need individual will first. For example, a community with God does not diminish the values of the individual, nor does it isolate them from God. Second, is that God created other people because he knew we shouldn't be. This is a point from the opposition. But however, we have stated multiple times, community within this motion still exists. It is contingent on the will of the individual. This is what we believe. And third, we want to go on some words that we heard from the opposition. This is from the words of the second speaker, the member of government. I myself wouldn't be here without my brothers around me. Well, we believe this perfectly describes mentorship, which is a better established individual helping someone who is struggling. It is because the individual who is the mentor is able to put themselves first and gain the needed skills to establish themselves within a community that they are better able to help another individual. Still, the individual will comes first. This is an exact point that we outlined in our point of healthy selfishness. Moving on to what we heard from opposition a little bit in the second half of the debate, they never mention non-religious communities, and we believe this is a shirking of their burden. If they said in their own words, non-religious communities don't have community with God, therefore they are weaker. On this basis alone, we believe opposition should lose this motion. They have never contested the individual will outside of inside non-religious communities, outside of religious communities. We have debated both of these sides and provided plenty of reasons as to why the individual will is more important than the community will. And the last point I want to emphasize from a riddle from opposition is that we said the individual first, the community second. The community still exists. If someone depends solely on their community, they can never learn how to provide for themselves. And this actually weakens the community, for they now must expend more and more energy to take care of every single person who has never learned to provide for themselves. Moving on from that, I want to go into our positive material that we've heard from this debate, why they go out over opposition, and why this means that we should win. We have given you why the individual should come first through our points of the individual first, community second, and how if the community is helped first, it hurts the individual more. We have also shown you how this will lead to stronger will from God in our point of how the values of the individual do not isolate themselves from God, but we have our values because they bring us closer to God. These are our individual values. Next, we give you the point of healthy selfishness, speaking of how the one person who helps everybody but themselves is then left with nothing. Taking care of oneself first enables them to be in a better position to help others. This is a point illustrated by the opposition when he talked about his brothers in Christ helping him grow. These individual brothers bettered themselves first, found their own individual will first, and then they went to help other people. This individual will is what strengthened the community, which is why this point wins out over op. Next, we give you a sense of identity. When moving away from strenuous situations, what are we left with? Speaking of readiness, we are left with important milestones in life, graduations, marriages, things like this. Knowing what one can handle prepares them for progress. We believe that the points that we've given about sense of identity, allowing oneself to know what they want and what can handle, enables a person to be ready for the future. They are ready to move on with their life, improve their individual will, improve their current circumstances so that they may better provide for their communities. Through their better provision for the communities, the community itself is now able to help others at a better, higher, and much more substantial rate than it would have before. The last thing I want to touch on is the point that my member of government brought up, and I think the most important point of this debate. Individuals make up communities. Like I said before, community still exists, but it is contingent on the will of the individual. Without the individual, we have no community. Without strong individual will from the people within a community, the community itself is weak. In order to have a strong, well-flourishing community, you require well individuals. You require healthy individuals who take care of themselves first to expend a better and higher effort for others. Which is why we believe that government has proven beyond a doubt that opposition has not fulfilled the burden of this debate, which I'll say it one more time, is how to the best path to readiness. And we also believe that government has given you far more material, far more substantial material as to why the strengthening of the individual will is far more important than just strengthening the community will, which is why you should vote for government. Thank you.
All right, let's hear it again for these debaters up here. And All right, so while the judges deliberate, it'll just be a few more minutes, and then we'll come up here and give out awards. So just sit tight for a few minutes. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to give a huge thank you to all the students from every house who have contributed to each of these competitions this weekend. You all have done a phenomenal job, and we are so impressed with all of your talents. I would also like to thank the staff and faculty who so graciously gave up their time to help judge these competitions. Their support of Interregnum and the student body honestly means so much to all of us. And finally, I would like to thank the members of the Interregnum Committee, Sean, Julia, Addie, Amelia, Abby, Rochelle, and our advisors. And our advisors, Letitia and Dr. Tubbs. They have spent countless hours preparing everything for these past few days and have done a wonderful job of bringing Interregnum finally back in person. So to conclude our conversations on readiness this semester, I just wanted to give a few final thoughts on the theme. As soon as we chose this theme over the summer, I found myself constantly trying to figure out where I saw readiness in my own life and exactly what it meant in every aspect as a student, a daughter, a friend, and a leader. And honestly, leading up to this week, I thought I had a pretty good grasp on what I thought the theme was and how often I see it in my life. I often reflected on Esther, who used her virtues to properly equip her to save her people. And I thought a lot about Bilbo, who had few qualifications to become a successful burglar, but his quick wit made him ready to face the challenges ahead of him. Virtue seems inherently at the heart of readiness, as it is the foundation for any choice you might make. But these past few days have greatly changed my understanding of readiness. Virtue is, of course, still key to having a conversation on what readiness is and can be, but virtuous choices and actually being ready to make those choices is difficult. As Christians, we are called to be filled with joy, self-control, and love, and while these are amiable values, they can also be hard to keep in consideration in difficult moments. Many of you last saw me on Wednesday evening moderating the opening lecture. And to tell you that I was in no way ready for that challenge is an understatement. And for many of you, part of the comments that were made, you were not ready for either. And I wish I could say that the hardest part for me that night was my fear of public speaking, because who isn't afraid of public speaking? But the hardest part was truly how I felt that I had failed to prepare myself to be ready for that moment. Virtue and character are the backings behind so much of readiness. They are what, in many ways, prepares our thoughts and actions and motivations for us to do what is right. This is why King's motto, good, brave, and ready, is so important. Readiness without anything else is truly nothing. It is hollow and unsupported, and quite frankly, non-existent. So what does King's and tangentially readiness Interregnum make us ready for? One can argue that the college should ready us for a future and a career. And at King's Heart, their primary aim is to do that as an educational institution. But truly, before we can be ready, we also must be good and brave. Without these things, we are not ready for much. Being good and brave are not the sole prerequisites of being ready. However, being good and brave can aid in the moments where we are not ready. As much as we can aim to be ready for any situation thrown at us, we fail a lot. And I am certain that King's, in preparing us to be ready, knows we will fail. But this is why we study religion and philosophy, to help us look towards a kind of readiness that is above ourselves. Readiness is not the most conventional Interregnum theme, and I hope you all have been challenged to examine your own readiness in these trying times. Readiness is all, as Hamlet would say. But I think if this Interregnum has shown us anything in performing arts, parliamentary debate, or 3-hour art, or whatever competition, it is that there is so much more to living well, so much more behind readiness to be explored. I hope you will continue to think on the questions born this week, and for all we know, and you may discover more questions you have.
Now I would like to invite the rest of the Interregnum Committee up to join me for the final placement announcements.
We're going to start with reviewing the results from fall, starting with 24-hour film competition. In third place, we had the House of C.S. Lewis. In second place, we had the House of Sir Winston Churchill. And in first place, we had the House of Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
All right, from the great speech, we have, in third place, the House of Clara Barton. In second place, we have the House of Susan B. Anthony. And then in first place, we have the best house, the House of C.S. Lewis.
All right, for academic writing, in third place, the House of Clara Barton. In second place, the House of Queen Elizabeth I. And in first place, the House of Corrie ten Boom.
For impromptu lecture, in third place, we had the House of C.S. Lewis. In second place, we had the House of Margaret Thatcher. And in first place, we had the House of Ronald Reagan.
And the overall winner for the fall semester was the House of Margaret Thatcher. Oh, sorry, I was wrong. It was a second place tie between the House of Corrie ten Boom and the House of Margaret Thatcher. And in first place was the House of C.S. Lewis.
Okay, so we're now going to move on to the spring competition, starting with the Dirt Bowl. In third place, we have the House of Clara Barton. In second place, we have the House of Margaret Thatcher. And in first place, the House of Corrie ten Boom.
Next, we have the creative writing competition. Oh. In third place, we have the House of Margaret Thatcher. In second place, we have the House of Queen Elizabeth I. And in first place, we have the House of Susan B. Anthony.
Okay, now for the 3-hour art competition. In third place, we have the House of Queen Elizabeth I. In second place, we have the House of Margaret Thatcher. And finally, in first place, we have the House of Corrie ten Boom.
For random theme debate, in third place, we have the House of Corrie ten Boom. In second place, we have the House of Ronald Reagan. And in first place, we have the House of Margaret Thatcher.
For performing arts, in third place, we have the House of Bonhoeffer. In second place, we have the House of Susan B. Anthony. And in first place for her amazing performance on Wednesday night, I mean, she really kept it together, we have Emma Powell.
There are so many people I would like to thank for this award. First of all, I would like to thank the administration for planning tonight on April Fool's Day. Phenomenal choice. And I would also like to thank the actual winner of performing arts, the House of Margaret Thatcher.
And for parliamentary debate, in third place we have the House of Queen Elizabeth I. In second place, the House of Sir Winston Churchill. And in first place, the House of Margaret Thatcher.
For the winners of the spring competition, in third place, the House of Queen Elizabeth I. In second place, the House of Susan B. Anthony. And in first place, the House of Margaret Thatcher.
And now, we have the results for the Interregnum Cup. Before I begin, the winner, please do not rush the stage. Please stay in your seat. You will receive your trophy afterwards. In third place, we have the House of Susan B. Anthony. In second place is the House of Queen Elizabeth I. And in first place, the winner of the Interregnum Cup is the House of Margaret Thatcher.
Hi, friends. Oh, thanks. Stop that. All right. Yeah. Stop. Anywho, all right. First of all, thank you all so much for being here tonight. This is our first in-person final debate in 2 years. Right? Oh, you're right, 2019, so I can't do math. That's fine. So, we would like to take a very quick group photo. Now, here are the rules. Relax, you're not moving. You just have to sit there. Your bottom stays in the pew. Do not stand up. We will capture your lovely faces. We are just documenting this moment. Bethany. Everyone say hi to Bethany. All right, SBA, sit down. Everyone smile. Joshua Story, will you please put down your hat? Lovely. Yep. All righty. So, it's been a long year. We've had a lot of really, really fun competitions. I think my favorite one was the fact that I did not have to run all around the city during Great Race, but got to watch all of you run around the city for Great Race. But seriously, thank you all so much for all of the effort and the fun that we get to share and we get to have together during all of our competitions. It's really fun to see a really great community get together and just have a really good time. So with that being said, I know that you're kind of sick of us talking at you and you would kind of like to know what's going on with these trophies behind us. Anyway, have a great night. Thank you so much. Just kidding. I'm kidding, relax. Oh, that was, way to go, ladies. That was nice. Okay, couple quick rules when we are announcing. As a reminder, we are not on campus. We are not jumping on pews. We are not crawling over pews. We're not jumping on chairs. The next thing, we have some really lovely kneelers that are here at the front. We're not standing on those at all. We're not touching those. We're not standing on the little fence thing. Only, I ask, only that the House Cup first place winner rushes the stage to grab their trophy. But we're also going to update all of our house photos because our website needs a little update because our photos are a couple years old for with your banners. Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Banner photo? Great. It's going to be super easy. It's going to go really quickly. And I mean like a couple of shots from Bethany and you move along and skedaddle and go celebrate. So we will call your house up to the front, and then as soon as we call your house, you take a picture, and then you leave. We love you, but you leave. Got it? Great. Anything else? Oh, final scores?
Yeah, find us like after we have.
All right, last thing. As a reminder, we only announced the top 3. For all of our other friends who did a great job, we will let you know your results if you come and find us, but it'll be after photos, okay? Great. All right, so I have the privilege of announcing the 3rd place overall House Cup winner this year. And 3rd place is the House of Susan B. Anthony.
I would like to say congratulations to 2nd place to the House of Corrie ten Boom. And in 1st place, the House